We live in a world that feels more finite than ever. Finite time, finite attention, finite patience. Every moment competes for our focus. Every voice demands our trust. But trust, real human trust, isn't something that can be demanded. It must be earned, and it must be nurtured. In a world of limits, trust is the one thing that allows us to move beyond them. It is the invisible currency that makes all meaningful relationships, all effective teams, and all great organizations possible. Without it, everything becomes transactional. With it, everything becomes transformational. Trust begins where certainty ends. It's easy to say we trust someone when everything is predictable and smooth. But the true test of trust happens in uncertainty, when we don't have all the answers, when things could go wrong, when outcomes are unclear. That's when trust reveals its real value. It's not built by guarantees, but by courage. It's built by people willing to be honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. It's built by teams that are willing to say, I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. When we choose vulnerability over perfection, we create the space for others to do the same. That's where trust takes root. The problem is, we've built systems that often reward performance over honesty. We measure success in quarterly results, not long-term relationships. We applaud confidence more than humility. But in doing so, we forget that trust doesn't thrive in fear. It thrives in safety. When people feel safe to speak up, to make mistakes, to be human, that's when creativity and collaboration flourish. The irony is that in our pursuit of efficiency, we often eliminate the very thing that makes human connection possible: patience. Trust takes time. And in a finite world, time is the one resource we're always trying to save. But saving time can sometimes cost us trust. And once trust is gone, no shortcut can bring it back. Consistency builds confidence. It's not the grand gestures or big promises that create trust. It's the small, repeated acts that prove reliability. It's showing up when it's inconvenient, following through on the things no one sees, and keeping commitments even when no one would blame you for breaking them. Trust is built in moments that seem small but carry enormous weight. When a leader checks in on their team after a hard day, when a friend keeps a secret, when a colleague admits a mistake, that's trust in action. It's never built overnight, but it can be destroyed in a moment. That's why consistency is not just about habit. It's about integrity, doing what's right, not just what's easy. Leaders often believe that authority creates trust. It doesn't. Authority might create compliance, but never trust. Trust comes from empathy, from the willingness to understand before being understood. People don't trust titles, they trust character. They trust those who see them, value them, and make them feel safe. A leader earns trust not by commanding attention, but by giving it. They build it by listening deeply, by asking real questions, by admitting they don't have all the answers. The best leaders understand that trust is not about perfection. It's about presence. When people feel genuinely seen and heard, they naturally begin to believe that their leader has their best interest at heart. That belief is the foundation of every high-performing team, every loyal customer base, every lasting friendship. In a finite world, infinite trust creates lasting impact. We can't control everything. Resources will always be limited, mistakes will always happen, and change will always come faster than we expect. But when trust is strong, those limits don't define us. They unite us. Teams that trust each other move faster, not because they rush, but because they align. They don't waste energy protecting themselves from one another. They invest it in building something greater together. When trust exists, we replace competition with collaboration, suspicion with support, and fear with shared purpose. That's the real power of trust. It multiplies potential. Imagine a world where trust becomes our first instinct, not our last resort. Where organizations measure success not just in numbers, but in relationships. Where we value honesty over perfection and empathy over ego. That world is possible, but it requires courage. The courage to go first, to believe in people before they've proven themselves, to offer transparency when it's easier to hide behind image. Trust grows when someone takes that first step. And once it begins, it has the power to inspire others to do the same. We live in a time where technology can connect us instantly, yet genuine trust feels harder to find. We scroll through perfect lives on screens, but what we crave is connection without filters. The world may be finite, but our capacity for trust is not. When we choose to trust others, we invite them to trust us back. When we build trust, we build resilience. And when we lead with trust, we lead beyond the limits of our world. That's how we build something that lasts, something that doesn't end when a project ends, or when circumstances change, or when times get hard. Because trust, once established, doesn't fade, it grows. Trust begins at the very edge of what we can control. It's easy to feel confident when everything around us is predictable, when the path ahead is clear, and when outcomes follow our expectations. But trust, in its purest form, doesn't grow in certainty, it grows in uncertainty. It is born the moment we realize that no matter how much we plan, how much we prepare, or how much we want to be sure, life will always surprise us. And it is in that unpredictability that we must decide whether to protect ourselves or to open ourselves up to others. Most people choose control because control feels safe. But control is an illusion. It can't guarantee connection, and it can't inspire loyalty. What builds trust is the willingness to say, I don't know what will happen next, but I believe in you. That belief creates something far stronger than any system or strategy ever could. When we think about trust, we often associate it with reliability or dependability. Someone keeping their promises or doing what they said they would do. And while that's true, that's only the surface of it. Real trust isn't tested when things go right. It's tested when things go wrong. It's easy to trust a friend when they agree with us. But do we trust them when they challenge us? It's easy to trust a leader when the company is succeeding, but what about when it struggles? In moments of uncertainty, people don't look for perfect answers. They look for honesty. They look for signs that even if the outcome is unknown, they are not alone in facing it. That is the moment where trust begins, where we trade certainty for connection, where we accept the risk of being let down in order to build something authentic. In workplaces, families, and friendships alike, we spend so much time trying to prevent mistakes that we forget mistakes are often where trust is forged. When someone admits they messed up, when they apologize sincerely and take responsibility, that honesty deepens trust far more than perfection ever could. It's not the absence of failure that makes someone trustworthy, it's their integrity in the face of it. Trust grows when people are real, not flawless. And yet, so many of us hide behind appearances, fearing that showing vulnerability will make us look weak. In truth, vulnerability is the foundation of trust because it signals authenticity. When you allow yourself to be seen as imperfect, you invite others to do the same, and suddenly, everyone can exhale. The pressure to pretend fades away, and genuine connection takes its place. Leaders who understand this create cultures where uncertainty isn't feared but embraced. They don't try to eliminate every risk or control every variable. Instead, they focus on creating an environment of safety, where people know that honesty won't be punished and curiosity won't be silenced. In such spaces, people dare to speak up, to take initiative, to experiment without fear of failure. And ironically, this openness to uncertainty creates stronger, more resilient organizations. When trust is present, teams can adapt faster because they communicate openly and recover quickly from mistakes. When it's absent, even small problems turn into crises because everyone is too afraid to tell the truth. We can see this principle play out everywhere, even outside the workplace. Consider relationships. Every meaningful relationship is built on a leap of faith. You can't prove that someone will always stay, always care, or always keep their promises. You choose to believe they will, even without guarantees. That leap is what makes trust powerful. It's a choice, not a certainty. And that choice carries risk, but also beauty. Because when two people trust each other despite the unknown, they create something far greater than safety. They create belonging. They create love. The same holds true in teams, partnerships, and communities. Trust transforms ordinary interactions into deep human bonds that can weather the storms of life. But here's the paradox. Many people want trust without risk. They want to know the outcome before committing. They want proof before belief. Yet, trust doesn't work that way. You can't have both complete control and complete trust. You must give something up to gain it. You must be willing to say, I'm uncertain, but I'll move forward anyway. That willingness is the beginning of leadership. Because leading others in any form is an act of trust. You're trusting that people will show up, that they'll share your vision, that they'll care as much as you do. And they, in return, trust you to guide them, even when you don't have all the answers. It's a mutual exchange of faith that strengthens with every shared challenge. When uncertainty strikes, and it always does, it exposes the truth about our relationships and our culture. Do people retreat and protect themselves, or do they come together and support one another? The difference lies in the trust that existed before the uncertainty arrived. If people feel safe enough to be honest, they will face the unknown together. If they don't, they'll hide mistakes, cover weaknesses, and pretend everything's fine until it's too late. Trust doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it transforms how we navigate it. It allows us to step into the unknown with confidence that whatever happens, we'll handle it as a team. One of the most profound ways to build trust in uncertainty is through transparency. When leaders share what they know and what they don't, when they admit their doubts instead of pretending to have all the answers, it builds credibility. People don't expect perfection. They expect honesty. A leader who says, "I don't know what the next quarter will bring, but here's what we're doing to prepare," creates more stability than one who hides behind false certainty. Transparency gives others permission to be open too, and that shared openness creates unity. Trust is not a destination, it's a living, breathing process. It requires constant nurturing, especially when the world feels unstable. The more complex and unpredictable our lives become, the more vital trust becomes. We can't possibly prepare for every scenario, but we can prepare ourselves to rely on one another. That's why the most successful teams are not those that avoid uncertainty. They're the ones that embrace it with trust as their foundation. They don't fear the unknown because they know they won't face it alone. When you build trust that begins where certainty ends, you discover a kind of strength that doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It's the strength of people who believe in each other, even when they can't see the outcome. It's the courage to move forward without guarantees, to share the truth even when it's uncomfortable, to listen even when you disagree. Trust built on certainty is fragile. It disappears the moment things go wrong. But trust built in uncertainty endures because it's rooted in faith, humility, and shared humanity. And that kind of trust doesn't just survive the unpredictable world we live in, it thrives in it. Trust, like a bridge, is not built in a single act, but through countless steady steps taken over time. Each moment of honesty, each promise kept, each action aligned with our words strengthens the structure. And just as a bridge needs consistency to hold weight, trust needs reliability to sustain belief. People do not trust because we say the right things once. They trust because we do the right things repeatedly. In a world full of promises made and broken, it is consistency that separates those who are dependable from those who are merely impressive for a moment. Confidence is not inspired by grand gestures. It grows quietly from predictability, from the assurance that someone will show up again and again, even when no one is watching. We live in a time obsessed with quick wins and instant results. Everyone wants to stand out, to be noticed, to make a big impact fast. But trust doesn't care about how fast you move. It cares about how faithfully you move. The world doesn't trust the loudest voice. It trusts the steady one. The one that doesn't need to shout to prove credibility. The one that shows up with the same integrity whether things are going well or falling apart. Consistency is often overlooked because it doesn't always get attention, but it's the quiet rhythm that builds lasting confidence. The most trusted people are not those who promise perfection, but those who make others feel safe in their presence. When we think of consistency, we often think of doing the same thing over and over again, but that's not entirely true. Real consistency isn't about routine, it's about reliability. It's not about being unchanging, but about being dependable. A leader who adapts their strategy to new challenges can still be consistent in their values. A friend who evolves with time can still be consistent in their loyalty. Consistency doesn't mean we never change. It means our core principles remain the same even as circumstances shift. People learn to trust us not because we never falter, but because we respond with integrity when we do. They learn that our word means something, that our actions align with our intentions, and that we don't compromise what we stand for, no matter how difficult it becomes. Consistency also builds emotional safety. Think of the relationships that matter most in life. What makes them special is not the extraordinary moments, it's the reliability that underlies them. The friend who answers your call every time you're struggling, the colleague who supports your ideas even when no one else does, the leader who checks in after a tough day. These moments may seem small, but they create emotional deposits of trust that accumulate over time. People feel confident when they know they can rely on someone's behavior, when they don't have to guess whether they'll show up, listen, or care. Consistency gives them that assurance. It removes fear and replaces it with stability. In leadership, consistency is the cornerstone of credibility. When a leader acts according to their stated values, even under pressure, people take notice. They begin to believe not only in the leader's words, but in their character. The opposite is also true. When words and actions don't align, trust collapses quickly. A leader who preaches transparency but hides the truth, who demands accountability but avoids it personally, sends a clear message that trust is conditional. And once people sense that inconsistency, it's difficult to rebuild confidence. Consistency, on the other hand, breeds loyalty. It sends the message, you can count on me, even when it's hard. That assurance becomes a foundation others can stand on, especially in uncertain times. Consistency doesn't mean never making mistakes. It means taking responsibility for them. When people see that you respond to mistakes with honesty, humility, and learning, their trust in you grows deeper. They understand that you won't abandon your principles when faced with adversity. Mistakes handled with integrity often build more trust than flawless performance ever could. Because perfection may impress, but consistency reassures. People don't need you to be perfect. They need to know they can depend on you. In relationships and organizations alike, inconsistency is one of the fastest ways to erode trust. When expectations constantly change, when promises are made and forgotten, when moods dictate decisions, people lose confidence. They start protecting themselves, holding back ideas, or disengaging emotionally. Inconsistency breeds insecurity. It creates an environment where no one knows where they stand. On the other hand, when consistency becomes the norm, people relax. They speak freely. They take risks. They collaborate. They know they won't be blindsided by shifting behavior or broken promises. That's why consistency is more than a habit. It's a form of leadership. It tells others, you are safe here. It's also important to recognize that consistency requires patience. Trust built on repetition doesn't appear overnight. It's the result of hundreds of small actions over long periods. In the beginning, consistency may go unnoticed, but over time it creates a reputation. People may not remember every specific action, but they remember how you made them feel. They remember that you were there when it mattered. They remember that you followed through. Consistency doesn't ask for attention, it earns respect. In our personal lives, the same truth applies. Whether we are parents, partners, or friends, our loved ones don't trust our intentions. They trust our patterns. A child doesn't feel safe because a parent says, I love you. Once, they feel safe because the parent shows it repeatedly through care and presence. A partner doesn't build confidence from one romantic gesture. They build it from the everyday moments of reliability. A friend isn't trusted because of a single act of kindness, but because they've been there through countless seasons. Consistency is love in motion. It proves care through time. The challenge of being consistent is that it demands alignment between what we believe, what we say, and what we do. It's easy to promise integrity when things are comfortable. It's harder to live by it when comfort disappears. Consistency requires discipline, a steady commitment to values even when they cost us something. It's about keeping promises even when no one's checking. It's about showing up for people even when it's inconvenient. That's why it's so powerful, it's rare. And anything rare is valuable. In business, in leadership, and in life, confidence doesn't come from slogans or strategies. It comes from the slow accumulation of trust built through consistency. When people know what to expect from you, when they see you keep showing up the same way, with honesty, kindness, and reliability, they begin to believe. And belief is the foundation of every great relationship, every great team, every great movement. Consistency is how we turn intention into credibility. It's how we transform words into proof. It's how we build trust that lasts long after the moment has passed. The truth is, consistency is not glamorous. It doesn't always get recognition, but it's the quiet force that holds everything together when the noise fades. In a world where attention is fleeting and loyalty is rare, being consistent is an act of strength. It's the choice to keep showing up with integrity again and again until trust becomes unshakable. Because in the end, people don't follow perfection. They follow predictability. They don't seek brilliance. They seek belief. And that belief, that confidence, is born from one thing: unwavering consistency. Leadership is not a position. It is a relationship. Titles can demand obedience, but only empathy can earn trust. Authority can make people listen, but empathy makes them believe. The difference between a manager and a leader often lies not in what they know, but in how they make people feel. People do not follow orders. They follow those who make them feel valued, understood, and safe. A leader who leads through empathy does not see others as resources to be managed, but as human beings with hopes, fears, and aspirations. Trust grows naturally in such an environment because when people feel seen, they no longer have to hide. They bring their full selves to the table, and with that comes their best work, their best ideas, and their most genuine loyalty. Empathy is often misunderstood as softness or weakness, but it is neither. It is strength in its purest form, the courage to understand before judging, to listen before speaking, and to connect before commanding. It requires patience, humility, and a willingness to let go of ego. Most people want to be right more than they want to understand. Empathetic leaders reverse that. They seek to understand even when they disagree because they know that trust is not built through power, but through presence. When people know their leader genuinely listens to them, they stop performing for approval and start contributing for a shared purpose. The leader no longer needs to push. People begin to move with them, willingly and wholeheartedly. When authority is used without empathy, it breeds compliance. Compliance looks like cooperation, but it's fragile. It disappears the moment supervision does. People comply because they have to, not because they want to. They'll do what's required, but never more. But when empathy drives leadership, it inspires commitment. Commitment comes from choice, not force. People who feel understood go beyond what's expected because they believe they are part of something meaningful. They feel that their contributions matter, that their struggles are acknowledged, and that their humanity is respected. This shift from authority to empathy is what transforms a group of individuals into a community, a team into a family, and a company into a cause. Empathy also changes how leaders communicate. A leader who relies on authority tells people what to do. A leader who relies on empathy asks what people need to succeed. The first focuses on control. The second focuses on understanding. This subtle difference changes everything. When you lead with empathy, you begin every conversation with curiosity. You assume there's more to the story than what you can see. You recognize that behind every behavior is a reason, behind every mistake is a fear, and behind every silence is something unsaid. This mindset doesn't excuse poor performance. It explains it. And once you understand it, you can fix it. Empathy allows leaders to address root causes rather than symptoms, to heal rather than punish. The best leaders are not those who have all the answers, but those who create spaces where answers can emerge. They understand that their role is not to be the smartest person in the room, but to make others feel smart enough to share what they know. They replace intimidation with inclusion, authority with authenticity. They know that trust doesn't come from commanding attention, but from giving it. When people are heard, they open up. When they open up, they trust. And once trust is established, performance follows naturally. No amount of pressure or control can replace the motivation that comes from feeling genuinely valued. Empathy also helps leaders navigate conflict. In every team, disagreements are inevitable. But when empathy is present, conflict doesn't destroy trust. It strengthens it. Because when people feel heard, they can disagree without resentment. They can express frustration without fear. They can challenge ideas without challenging one another's worth. Empathetic leaders create this balance by modeling calm, curiosity, and compassion. They don't rush to win arguments, they seek to understand perspectives. And through that understanding, they often find solutions that authority alone could never produce. Trust deepens every time a leader chooses understanding over dominance. Empathy also requires self-awareness. To understand others, leaders must first understand themselves. They must be aware of their own emotions, biases, and triggers. Too often, leaders react to others not because of what's happening in the moment, but because of unexamined fears or frustrations within themselves. An empathetic leader pauses before reacting, asks questions before assuming, and chooses connection over control. They understand that leadership is not about proving superiority, but about earning respect through humility. People will forgive mistakes and judgment, but they rarely forgive arrogance or indifference. Empathy is especially powerful in difficult times. When people are struggling, emotionally, mentally, or financially, they don't need more direction, they need understanding. They need to feel that their leader sees their struggle and cares about it. A leader who says, "I understand this is hard for you, and I'm here with you," gives people strength to keep going. The words don't need to be perfect. What matters is sincerity. In moments of crisis, empathy becomes the anchor that steadies everyone. It turns fear into trust and confusion into clarity. Empathy also extends beyond individuals. It shapes entire cultures. A culture built on empathy values people over profit, growth over greed, and purpose over politics. It encourages collaboration instead of competition. It turns workplaces into communities where people support one another rather than protect themselves. In such cultures, innovation flourishes because people are not afraid to fail. Creativity thrives because people feel safe to express ideas. Retention improves because people don't just work for a paycheck, they work for each other. And all of it begins with leaders who choose empathy over ego. It's worth remembering that empathy doesn't mean agreeing with everyone or avoiding tough decisions. Sometimes leadership requires saying no, setting boundaries, or making choices that not everyone will like. But even in those moments, Empathy changes how those decisions are made and communicated. When people feel their perspective was genuinely heard, they can accept outcomes they don't prefer. What they can't accept is feeling ignored or dismissed. Empathetic leadership doesn't mean everyone always gets their way. It means everyone always feels respected along the way. That respect is what preserves trust even through disappointment. Leaders who lead with empathy inspire trust that outlives their tenure. Long after they move on, people remember how they made them feel. They remember the leader who listened, who cared, who believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. That memory becomes a standard for what true leadership looks like. Authority fades when titles change, but empathy leaves a legacy that endures. The most powerful leaders are those who use their influence to lift others, who see people not as tools, but as partners, and who understand that leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. Empathy is not a tactic. It is a way of being. It is choosing to see the world through another's eyes and respond with compassion instead of control. It's the ability to recognize that people don't want to be managed. They want to be understood. And once they feel understood, they will give you their trust, their loyalty, and their best selves. Leadership without empathy is merely authority. Leadership with empathy is humanity in action. It turns power into purpose and direction into devotion. When a leader leads with empathy, they don't just earn trust. They create it, nurture it, and multiply it in everyone around them. We live in a world defined by limits. Limited time, limited attention, limited resources. Every day, we face boundaries that remind us of how finite our existence truly is. And yet, within those boundaries, we have the ability to create something that feels limitless. That something is trust. Trust expands the possibilities of what people can achieve together. It breaks through the barriers that scarcity creates and replaces fear with cooperation. In a world where everything else runs out, money, energy, even life itself, trust endures. It multiplies, it spreads, and it outlasts the finite nature of everything around it. Infinite trust, once built, continues to influence, inspire, and connect people long after individual moments have passed. When we talk about impact, most people think about achievements, numbers, and results. But true impact is not measured by what we build. It's measured by how deeply we connect. You can construct a company, win awards, or accumulate wealth, but if no one trusts you, none of it truly lasts. Impact that endures is built on relationships, and relationships are built on trust. A business can fail, a project can end, a job can change, but the trust between people remains. That trust becomes the foundation upon which everything else can be rebuilt. When the world feels uncertain, trust is the one resource that doesn't run dry. It grows stronger the more it's shared. The beauty of trust is that it creates an infinite cycle of giving. When you trust someone, you empower them. You tell them, I believe in you. And that belief gives them confidence to rise to the occasion. When they in turn act with integrity, they reinforce your belief and the cycle continues. Trust creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond the initial act. One person's willingness to trust can inspire countless others to do the same. And that's how communities thrive, through trust that multiplies faster than fear can divide. Fear, after all, isolates, trust unites. Fear limits what we attempt, trust expands what we imagine possible. In our modern, competitive world, people often view trust as a risk. They think it makes them vulnerable, that trusting too much opens the door to disappointment. But the truth is, refusing to trust is the greater risk. When we hold back trust, we build walls around ourselves, and those walls keep out not only the bad, but also the good. They protect us from betrayal, but also prevent us from connection. The greatest teams, partnerships, and friendships are built not on fear of loss, but on faith and potential. It takes courage to trust because it requires letting go of control. But that very act of letting go is what allows trust to grow. You can't demand trust, and you can't fake it. You earn it through authenticity, and you give it through belief. Infinite trust is not about blind faith. It's about shared purpose. It's when people align not because they are told to, but because they choose to. When trust exists, communication becomes effortless, collaboration becomes natural, and progress accelerates. In such environments, mistakes don't destroy relationships. They strengthen them because people know intentions are pure. There's an understanding that everyone is working toward the same goal, even when disagreements arise. Trust transforms the finite energy of individuals into the infinite power of a collective. It turns separate efforts into synergy, and synergy into impact that echoes far beyond the moment. In leadership, infinite trust manifests as belief in people before they've proven themselves. The best leaders see potential in others even when they can't see it in themselves. They offer responsibility, not because it's earned, but because they know that responsibility given breeds responsibility returned. Trusting someone to lead, to decide, to create. These are acts of empowerment. They say, I believe you can handle this, and that belief often becomes the reason the person succeeds. Leaders who operate from fear create dependency. Leaders who operate from trust create growth. By giving trust freely, they build loyalty that no contract can enforce. And that loyalty becomes the glue that holds everything together, especially in times of crisis. When trust runs deep, people no longer work just for rewards. They work for each other. They show up not because they have to, but because they want to. They take ownership, they innovate, and they push boundaries because they believe their contribution matters. This is how infinite trust defies the limits of a finite world. It unlocks potential that would otherwise remain dormant. No system, no policy, no rule can create what trust can. Rules can define behavior, but only trust can inspire greatness. In organizations, infinite trust creates cultures that outlast leadership changes and market disruptions. When trust becomes part of the DNA, people know how to navigate uncertainty together. They don't wait for instructions. They act with integrity because they've internalized the values that built the trust in the first place. In such cultures, information flows freely, feedback is honest, and collaboration feels natural. People are not afraid to say, I don't know, because they know it won't be used against them. They are not afraid to take risks because they trust they won't be blamed for trying. That psychological safety fuels innovation. When people trust that failure won't define them, they explore new ideas, take bolder steps, and contribute beyond their roles. In contrast, environments built on fear or control eventually collapse under their own weight. Without trust, people play it safe, avoid responsibility, and protect themselves instead of the mission. They comply, but they don't commit. They meet expectations, but they never exceed them. Fear limits creativity, while trust amplifies it. Fear stifles communication, while trust opens it. Fear may produce short-term obedience, but trust produces long-term excellence. The most remarkable thing about trust is that its influence doesn't end when circumstances change. When you build trust with someone, whether in work, friendship, or family, that connection continues to shape both lives long after you part ways. It becomes a memory that influences future choices, a quiet assurance that good people exist, that honesty still matters. This is how trust becomes infinite. It transcends time and place. The impact of one person's integrity can inspire hundreds more to act with the same sincerity. A single act of trust can outlive the moment, the person, even the era in which it happened. That is lasting impact. We see this in history too. The people who changed the world were not those who demanded obedience, but those who inspired trust. They didn't seek to control followers, they sought to empower believers. Their words and actions aligned, and that consistency created faith that spread from person to person. Long after they were gone, the trust they built continued to move people to act. That's the true measure of infinite trust. It doesn't end when the person does. It becomes a legacy. In our finite world, we all have limited time, but what we do with that time defines the kind of legacy we leave. We can choose to chase power, success, or recognition, all of which fade, or we can choose to build trust, which endures. Power can compel people, but trust inspires them. Success can make you known, but trust makes you remembered. Recognition can earn applause, but trust earns loyalty. The people who make the greatest impact are not always the loudest or the most visible. They are the ones who quietly earn belief through their actions and consistency. At its core, infinite trust is an act of generosity. It's giving faith without expecting perfection. It's believing in people even when they stumble. It's choosing to see their potential rather than their flaws. And when you give that kind of trust, you awaken it in others. They start to believe in themselves. They begin to trust others too. And slowly, through countless small interactions, the infinite expands within the finite. That is how great relationships, great teams, and great societies are built. Not through control, not through authority, but through trust that knows no end. In the end, trust is what gives meaning to everything we build, everything we lead, and everything we love. It's not about perfection or power. It's about connection. When we choose to lead with honesty, to act with empathy, and to stay consistent in our values, we create something that time cannot erase. The world will always have limits, but trust allows us to rise beyond them. So keep showing up, keep believing, and keep building trust that outlives you, because that is how true leaders leave an infinite mark on a finite world.